Good morning, colleagues. Welcome. This is the second in our May webinar series under the theme Citizen-Centered Service Excellence. And my name is Loy Parks. I am the Leadership Development and Institutional Strengthening Specialist with the Caribbean Center for Development Administration, popularly known as CARICAD. We are an arm of CARICOM. We've been in existence this year 42 years. And our role is to support our 17 member states in the area of public sector reform and transformation. And we do so through our citizen, not our charter, but our citizens charter, our charter for the public service. We have a harmonized framework to guide public sector transformation across our member states, and it guides the work that we do. We support our member states through a number of capacity building initiatives, including our webinar series, our leadership development programs, and other capacity building programs. We partner through a number of memorandum of understanding with a number of partners in the region and globally in this regard. And we also support our member states through a number of technical assistance support programs in the areas such as strategic planning, organizational development, and strategic human resource management, among others. So if you want to learn more about our services, visit our website at caricad.net. So many of you I know, I am seeing the list of participants. Many of you are, I don't want to say old timers, because I suggest you're old, but you have been on this learning journey with us. I see a number of our alumni present and some persons who I know, they are part of our network. They are often present and in attendance at our webinars. And there may be others who are new. This is the first time you are joining a CARICAD webinar. A special welcome to you. And we want to ensure that you have the best possible virtual learning experience in this space for this webinar. And so distractions are usually the things that get us, So I'm inviting you all to close the other software applications, to mute your various phones. If you can't mute your phones, I invite you to even turn the ringer down. Remind your colleagues that you are, you're focusing on this learning experience so they can come in and distract you, ask you to sign that document, whatever it is they want you to do. After the webinar, bandwidth can sometimes be a challenge. And so to improve that, if you have an internet cable, it's better to plug that in. No, you are not required in a webinar to participate via using your microphone. However, that option is there for you to use during the discussion and answer period. And if you're going to do that, we invite you to ensure that those settings are working. You have a good working headset and microphone to use that as well. All right. And so I've seen lots of good mornings in the chat. And so I'm inviting you to also use the chat and let me know where you're joining us from today. What country are you joining us from today? And if you are here for the first time, when I say here, that's a CARICAD webinar for the first time, also let me know. So Patricia from Saint Lucia. Patricia is often with us. Gray Kentus also from Saint Lucia. I see Simon from BVI, Vishnu from Trinidad, folks from Grenada, Montserrat, St. Vincent. Yes, indeed. Dominica, Barbados. I see Joanne and Allison and Jacqueline from Jamaica, Nisha from Guyana. Fantastic. Tisha from Jamaica, Caroline also from Jamaica, Charles from Barbados. And then you know the topic that we're looking at today. And it's interesting, I see a lot of the IT people around the region very much present, people who are involved in public sector transformation. Donovan from Jamaica, welcome. Siobhan from Trinidad, Sherilyn from Saint Lucia, Charmaine from Dominica. Fantastic. It is just absolutely wonderful to have you here with us. So, to get us really warmed up, I am going to share a very short video, under 3 minutes. It's the first of 2 videos that we'll share. This is a video done by KPMG, an international consulting firm, and it's about the modern government and the fact that the modern government is digital. So just allow me to share that video with you. And after I share that video, I would invite us to share our own feedback on it. What are your own thoughts? What questions does it spur for you around this business of the modern government being digital? Here we go.
Today we live in the digital age. Every government agency is on a journey through digital transformation. But existing in the digital age is more than running a suite of technologies to streamline processes. Digital enables everything, and it can transform lives beyond anything we can imagine. Digital transformation done right is our path to the future. The modern government is connected to deliver better experiences. It leverages AI and automation to provide truly citizen-centric experiences. The modern government makes humans the focus of its transformation. It uses emerging technologies to continually provide ethical and efficient services, and it remains connected to the pulse to iteratively improve for its citizens. Always on, agile, equitable. As we hurtle through the digital era, modern governments need to deliver value faster. The federal government put a man on the moon more than 50 years ago and just landed a spaceship on Mars. Sometimes it doesn't get enough credit for what it's able to do. The opportunity for modern government agencies to transform the lives of millions of people is incredible, and the time is now to hit the accelerator. Robotics, artificial intelligence, automation. The impact of just these 3 technologies alone can no longer be underestimated. The modern government leverages each to create the agency its citizens demand. Blockchain, low-code platforms, Internet of Things. The power of technology to inject trust, create seamless experiences, and connect like never before is at a new level. And there's so much more untapped potential to come. For colleagues, for citizens, for communities, it's time to supercharge the journey. Digital. It's time to evolve.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that's that video, very short, to the point. I'm curious, what is your feedback? What are your reactions to the video? You can share in the chat. You can raise your hand if you wish as well, and we can acknowledge that hand. But do you agree with all the points? Does it raise questions, even concerns? What piques your interest in this video? That give you a moment to mull it. So Patrick said, work more agile. Yes, indeed. Then I said, it sounds very exciting and cutting edge. Yes, the video is very well done. Marilyn talks about, it speaks to citizens' demands and expectation. Yeah, this is what our citizens are demanding, that we are providing cutting edge service excellence, using the technology and using it well. You can use this technology and it's not done well. All right. Indeed. Any other thoughts? Does it raise any concerns? Luan says, digital delivery of better citizen-centered services. Charles is And Charles is joining us from Barbados. The use of digital technology must become an enabler for transformation, creating agility, convenience, 24/7 service. Yes, no longer are we accessing services, going to the brick and mortar ministry and department or agency. Sean Monroe says, Sean, another of our alumni. And I'm so pleased. I know Sean is from Jamaica, but I think he's joining all the way from the UK today. He said, good initiative, but cybersecurity is still a big gap to close, especially in the Caribbean context. Indeed, so it does have, there are those risks, it transforms lives. We have to keep up with the technology, the pace of the technology change. Oh, yes. Isaac is saying we are moving in that direction. That's in Grenada, but it's uncoordinated and piecemeal. And, indeed, a lot of times that is a situation. And that's why I think it's so important for us to be at this webinar today. Vishnu believes that, the world is highly globalized, mainly because of digitization, and that the Caribbean is still having to catch up. All right. Thank you. Thank you for all of these comments, because it raises the expectation that we have in terms of service excellence using digitization. It's also about the possibility of achieving higher levels of public service delivery through digitization. It also raises some of the challenges, one such being cybersecurity, and there are other things, human resources and others that we have to consider in the mix. The need for coordination and leadership if we're going to be approaching this in a very consistent and sustainable and joined up way. So thank you all very much. And that leads me now to introduce the topic for today's webinar. We are not just looking in the global space, but we are looking at our own Caribbean story. And we are looking at and featuring today digiGov. digiGov, it is an initiative under the Government of Saint Lucia. And we are going to be hearing the story of digiGov and that journey that has started and is ongoing. Digitization in pursuit of service excellence for the Government of Saint Lucia. And before I introduce our guest presenter, I'm going to just share the second video, which just introduces to all of us digiGov. So allow me to bring that video up. Thank you. Oh, my apologies. Hold on there, please.
The current COVID-19 global pandemic has peeled back delicate layers for Caribbean countries who have been at the forefront of the resilience-building agenda. With social distancing, remote working learning and business have become almost mandatory overnight, and the need to conduct daily activities digitally has become the new normal. The Government of Saint Lucia, through the Department of Public Service, recognizing this seismic shift, has accelerated the public launch of Saint Lucia's Digital Integrated E-Services Platform, an online one-stop government shop. This platform seeks to enhance the Government of Saint Lucia's service delivery to citizens, businesses, investors, and other governments. The initiative enables government to adopt a more citizen-centric approach to service delivery, whilst simultaneously addressing issues of efficiency and cost effectiveness. digiGov is designed to aggregate 154 services across 9 ministries and 13 government agencies to facilitate online application, payment, and to monitor progress of government services anywhere, anytime from any digital device. This project is being implemented using a 2-year phased approach. Phase 1 will see the automation of key services within the Department of Transport and enable customers to submit online applications and payments for duplicate, replacement, and renewal of driver's licenses. Additionally, the current systems will be integrated so as to allow law enforcement access to relevant information to conduct their duties effectively. Phase 2 will also focus on an additional 8 services: endorsements, learner's permit, driver's-related test, omnibus-related services, exchange of foreign licenses, all offered by the Division of Transport. The first phase of the digiGov project was launched within the Division of Transport and was made available on June 25, 2020. To access the government's online services through the digiGov platform, you will be required to register for a digiGov account using your NIC number via the link www.digigov.govt.lc. Contact Division of Public Sector Modernization at 468-4977 or 311. You can also email digigovinfo@govt.lc.
I am sure that your appetite has, you're no salivating. You're like, wow, we want to learn more. And to help us to learn more about digiGov Saint Lucia, I want to introduce our guest for today. He's none other than Mr. Marlon Narcisse. And so Marlon, while I'm introducing you, you're free to start sharing your screen, to turn on your camera. But while he's doing that, let me tell you a little bit more about Marlon. He is now the director of the Public Sector Modernization Division under the Department of the Public Service in the Government of Saint Lucia. In that role, he oversees the strategic direction of the government's digital transformation agenda, and is also tasked, along with his team, he's providing leadership and coordination for the development, implementation, and monitoring of their public sector modernization program. He has been very instrumental in establishing a variety of strategic reform initiatives, policies, and legislative and regulatory frameworks, all aimed at improving the overall management of the public service of St. Lucia. So we hand over now to Marlon, and we invite you as he goes along, we can post your questions in the chat, and at the end of his presentation, we will certainly allow time for question answers and discussions. Marlon, welcome to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Parks. Good morning, everybody. And just like to thank you and CARICAD for inviting me to make this presentation on our journey, of the implementation of this digital integrated service platform that we call digiGov. So, as we said earlier, my name is Marlon Narcisse, and I'm the director for the Division of Public Sector Modernization. Our agenda today will just take us through a brief explanation of what we are responsible for at the division, our vision for digital transformation, looking specifically at digiGov as a catalyst for digital transformation, some of our pain points and lessons and challenges that we encountered along the way, and just to give you an indication of what we plan for the future on digiGov, but also within the digital transformation space and the policy direction of the government. So who are we? At the Division of Public Sector Modernization, our vision is to have a proactive public service delivering quality, effective and efficient services in an equitable and responsive manner. Outlined there as well is our strategic objective, which focuses on strategic policy guidance to the government on the legal and regulatory framework to support ICT and digital transformation. We also provide leadership to the government in looking at how we could modernize the public service and also provide that support for the development of a digital economy. We focus as well on simplification of processes and workflows through business process reengineering, and we provide a lot of advice, technical as well, to our internal sister agencies of government. We also champion innovative applications like digiGov, and we're very excited today to be able to let you know of our experience and to just give you an idea of how things have been going for us in the implementation of the project. But also, the division is responsible for really looking at the government as a whole and ensuring that we build and continue to develop that cadre of professionals to support digital transformation. This has been one of probably the bigger challenges that we've had, looking at how government is traditionally structured. But over time, we're hoping that we could continue to recruit the right people, right persons, right officers, and put them in the right places. So the role of government in fostering digital transformation. We look at, again, that enabling environment, strengthening our infrastructure, providing meaningful connectivity to our constituents, our citizens. That's so important. A lot of times we speak about connectivity, but how much can be done with that connectivity? How useful is that connectivity to the individual? Also about capacity building, which is so important as we move along this digital transformation roadmap. Looking at what type of capacity that will be required to support the new and emerging technologies, but also the new and emerging requirements that is faced by the government and society. And it's also very important as we retool and reskill our individuals who are already in the workplace. And I'll speak to that as well going forward. And very, very important to that as well is what type of environment does the government provide for the private sector? Private sector participation is absolutely important, but as well as applied research and development, where we don't try to reinvent the wheel, but we focus on really capturing those opportunities that come up, that arise once we start to implement and use technology. So private sector innovation is very, very key. Looking at some of the accelerators as well to really engender that type of opportunity. And we have seen and have been negotiating through some of our World Bank projects additional opportunities where we could really get the private sector to participate in this process. So what is our vision for digital transformation in Saint Lucia? We see digital transformation as using technology to improve programs and services to create better value and outcomes for our residents and our citizens. This essentially would allow us to adopt new technologies to really support this and provide those better outcomes for our people, right? The goal of this initiative, specifically digiGov, is to ensure that our constituents also receive services in a timely manner, and that we use cutting-edge technologies to provide that support for them as well. A major component of our digital agenda is the whole concept of digital citizenship and digital identity. Karen Mosberger defined digital citizenship as those who use the internet regularly and effectively. And just conceptualizing our digiGov project, we felt it necessary for us to really capture that digital citizen. And she's speaking of regularly and effectively. I think we could all say that in our countries where we're from, in our workplaces, we see an extensive use of social media. And so we know that persons regularly use the internet. And we think that it's important for government to be able to harness that. So our goal here is to establish digital identities, establish this digital profile for every citizen, every resident, every business that connects into the digiGov platform. And that would allow us to then take the next step towards equity of access, where persons now have the resources to be able to access government services. E-participation, we want to, again, harness that culture of social media for the government to interact with its constituents on a daily basis. And this would be facilitated through our digital identity system, which we call the National Authentication Framework, and also to allow for data-only ones where all your information is secured and your connectivity into government through your digital profile is you only input that data once into the system. So digital transformation, who, what, and how. And we focus here on our citizens, residents, visitors, our businesses, civil servants, by providing them a decentralized access to our Government of Saint Lucia services. For our citizens and residents, the platform needs to be user-friendly, it must be digitally inclusive, and that essentially is one way that we see of really trying to strengthen that bond and that connection between the government and its constituents. Businesses and investors, again, providing this this policy framework within the platform and the implementation of the technology to really support private sector participation and involvement through things like a PPP, and essentially helping drive up technology adoption within the private sector, because government sees itself as the catalyst that can really drive innovative solutions and not just passive ICT interventions to improve one aspect of the work process, but holistically and strategically ensuring that there is consistency and optimized services throughout the private sector. Also for our civil servants, we saw an opportunity to really get those persons digitally empowered. And so throughout the beginning of the process, we ensured that they were the drivers of the information. They provided us with the information. They identified the issues that needed to be addressed, and they provided us with a lot of the feedback. We felt that ownership was very, very important in moving this transformation agenda, because, as you know, the only constant is change. However, persons are always very resistant to change, and we felt that from the beginning, if we were to involve them and help understand that change that is needed, they could then drive that change process. So we saw that the leadership at every level, from the grassroots level, right up from the officer, right up to the permanent secretary, was absolutely necessary and important as we move ahead. But it also spoke to our ability to focus on the users, and I will speak to that again a little later on. And again, looking at how we decentralize the government services, we focus on service bureaus, where we've now established 3 service bureaus around the island, which would allow persons to conveniently walk in to those bureaus to access government services when there is, when those persons do not have any devices or access to the internet. And so we're taking a holistic approach towards the implementation, or rather the decentralization of those government services. I also want to just highlight our digital development strategy framework. And we're actually working on this document as we speak. We're hoping to have a completed version of this document very soon. We started consultations right before the pandemic, and it has been a bit difficult trying to get agencies to complete their policy components of the documents because of all of the government shutdowns that we've had during the height of the pandemic. But we've been able to really get feedback, and we're hoping to get that document completed. But I just want to give you an idea of our long-term strategic outlook with regards to our digital Saint Lucia. So we have the environmental forces focusing on our stakeholder demands and needs. And again, I made sure to highlight that earlier when Dr. Parks asked for feedback, because I think it's so important that we understand the needs and the expectations of our citizens once we go on this agenda, once we embark on this digital transformation agenda. Which are the primary services that should take place early on in the system? One, to raise public value and interest, and also to make sure you're addressing the immediate needs of the public. International and national economic environment. What does the environment look like, and where can we harness support, both financial, legal, and regulatory support? And the national development agenda is very, very key. If I could just give you quickly an experience I had when we first implemented our first national ICT policy and sectoral strategy. Initially we brought all the stakeholders in, and essentially we said, hey, what would you like? What would you like government to do? And within our own small space in the ICT space, we came up with so many grand things that we wanted to do. However, when we looked at the government's short to medium term agenda, where the actual funding was being pushed into, we were very far off. So there was a clear delineation with where we wanted to go, where we saw things going, and what government was doing as a priority. And so this time around, we're changing that focus. What we did, we decided to identify the digital economy sectors, and then essentially change the strategy to see where we can now look at digital transformation. How could ICT impact education, health, agriculture, tourism as part of that national development agenda? And that speaks to, the policy pillars and accelerators here, which speaks to governments and funding. So we more or less align our digital strategy directly with the other sectors of the economy priorities of the government. And we've seen a lot of dividends, a lot of benefit in doing that. And again, looking at how we get buy-in from at that sectoral level, and persons just seeing the need as well within their own areas to harness technology to improve outcomes for their citizens, and also to build on these internal efficiencies that is so important for government. So it's not necessarily about making a profit for government, it's about reducing the cost of operations. And we thought these were the key sectors that we should really focus on at this point. Digital security and trust is another important accelerator, again, reaching out at that grassroots level to ensure that persons trust government. And again, digiGov is we see digiGov as being able for us to do that. And this is one of the reasons why our tagline is what it is, serving people and businesses with that island love, and trying to just humanize the face of government as well. Our core values speak to integrity, innovation, and community. And our stakeholders, we focus on our citizens and society, the business sector, as well as the public service. So I'm going to go into the digiGov itself, our digital service platform, and what it is. So what was the problem that we were trying to solve? And we saw digiGov as a technology-driven shift from limited business hours, long queues, long processing times, and this whole concept of silo operations to a more inclusive government where you have data only once, 24/7 access to government services, secure online transactions, and reduce processing times, and that whole concept of data only once. And we will speak to that a little later on as well. So how did we take this on? Initially, we thought it was necessary for us to really understand the environment that we want to change. Focus on business process reengineering based again on the priority areas. And so the proof of concept for digiGov really started at the Department of Transportation, because we felt for two reasons. One, we know that a major component of the project would focus on identity management. And secondly, we also wanted to target a high value, the high impact service, which would be the driver's license. And you'll see that at the on the next couple of slides. We also undertook a legal assessment, again, understanding the legal environment, identifying the gaps, and then making recommendations to ensure that these gaps can be filled in preparation for the launch of the platform. Again, looking at our ICT infrastructure, again, relevant both at the agency level as well as focusing on the entire government service and Saint Lucia as a whole, for that matter, ensuring that there is the ICT infrastructure to support real-time online service access for the public. And as I mentioned earlier, we have a very detailed and aggressive change management framework for user adoption. And because it was necessary both from an ICT perspective as well as from a political perspective to show that, hey, the implementation of ICT does not mean persons losing their jobs, but it means retooling, reskilling, and retraining persons so that they can now participate in this new digital economy. So digiGov as a catalyst for digital transformation focuses on connecting people, which is very, very important. We want to empower our citizens to collaborate with government on their terms, and it goes back to inclusivity, e-participation, e-democracy. And so our first phase now is the services to drive access and drive traffic to the platform. And then going forward, we would then bring in some e-participation types of services. In fact, we already have one of them online, which is in testing right now, which is called a donation service. So a lot of all of these opportunities we get throughout the year, where we need to raise funds for whether it's a hurricane or raise funds to help somebody else, somebody who's in distress. We are able now to create. We've already created a donation service where the public can go in there to provide support. We do a lot of telethons in Saint Lucia as well, and so this is an opportunity to really get persons to come in and interact. Connecting businesses, again, how can we then utilize the private sector support to drive the innovation that we want on the digiGov platform? Connecting ministries and agencies, and that in itself speaks to the work that we're doing now internally to build on efficiencies and to reduce the total cost of operating government. And we're also looking at possible ways of connecting Saint Lucia to other jurisdictions primarily through our trade platform, which we're now, at least in the terms of reference stages, in Saint Lucia. So where are we now? Since 2020, we've been able to launch 21 services. Primarily, those services are driver's license related. As I said, we wanted to focus on a service that has high impact, and also giving us the opportunity to really understand how best we could implement, or rather the most pragmatic approach to implementing our identity management system. We've also have a digital COVID-19 digital vaccine certificate online as well. So persons who've been vaccinated can go online and apply for that certificate. We also have our birth certificate, which was recently launched. So currently, our people can apply for a birth certificate or a death certificate online. And we have a few more services coming on, which I will show you at the end, at least those services that we want to have online before the end of 2022. Yeah, sorry about that. So some of our digiGov stats, and we felt it was necessary to really share this as part of our presentation, just to, you get information and you need to be able to understand that information and analyze that information, and it's very instructive going forward. So I would start with the Department of Transport, and we notice we have the transactions and the payments separately. And I just wanted to make that point by doing it this way. So what we recognize is that the demographics and culture play a very, very, very key role, and trust as well, for that matter, and with persons accessing government services online. And so on the first pie chart to the left, sorry, you'll notice that 26% of the payments have been full end-to-end online, and counter payments at 74%. So I just want to explain counter payments first. So counter payments essentially allows, as part of our policy of inclusiveness, every application is done on the platform. So you could go home, you could, if you registered, you register. When you register, you go on there and you apply for a service. So you could do the entire application process online. However, because we know that we have such a large population of unbanked individuals, we still give persons the option of paying over the counter. So the platform would give you a bill ID, which you can then take to any government treasury office to make that payment over the counter. However, we see 26% of the applications or transactions are being done online. At the height of the pandemic, that was actually at about 40%. And it was even the 26% is still in line with the feedback that we received from our initial sets of surveys in just trying to understand whether persons would be willing to access government services online at the transport department. And this is very instructive, again, in the policy set, the policies that we're going to be putting in place, and further PR and additional stakeholder outreach to really drive those numbers up. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, I had a meeting with the PS, and he said he wants the PS at the Department of Transport, and he wants to get that up to about 60%, which is doable. Again, the platform also gives persons notifications as to when their driver's license would be expiring, and that actually gives you a 90-day time period in which you can do that application. So we're ensuring that we're taking care of persons' needs, the requirements for online access, but also reducing on the workload of the department by giving persons an additional 90 days in which they could apply for before the expiration of their driver's license. At the Civil Status Registry, again, we see it's about the demographics. So we see that there's a big age difference if persons who normally go to apply for Civil Status Registry documents, especially the birth and death certificates. And so we have a large number of persons, a very large number of persons still doing over the counter. The service has been in production about 2 months now. And so it's a matter of using that data for us to then change strategy, improve on our strategy to at least get more persons to go online. But we have a culture here of walking in for services, and we know that will not change overnight. But we don't let that in itself, prevent, us from moving forward with this digital strategy. We think that the most important part of it is the whole idea of inclusivity and making sure that even though you do not have a device, government provides you with access to a device. And even though you cannot pay online, government still provides you with an option or process by which you can still interact online as well. And we also have our digital vaccine certificate, which is 100% online. It's a free service. And as of Monday, we had about 4,875 applications. I also want to give you an idea of some of the legal and regulatory reforms that we at least have recommended in the first phase of the platform. One, it speaks to our public sector data sharing bill. And it more or less speaks to the expeditious sharing of government sector data between government agencies. You would think that, hey, that's a no-brainer. However, it is very, very difficult to get information because, again, focusing on those silos type of concept of governance that we've had in the from since independence, even before independence, we find that it's very, very difficult, and it's also an issue. It's also an issue of personality as well, surprisingly. But then, that's very, very, very important. So we ensure that this is in law to support again the operations of the platform. We currently have an e-transactions bill, which was partially commenced to support the start of the project in June of 2020. However, we made some additional recommendations to strengthen that legislation, focusing on the standards and the best practice of the UNCITRAL model legislation from the UN. And also the digiGov digital government bill, which more or less focuses on improving access to the platform and covering areas like cloud computing, etc. And it also gives the minister the ability to set regulations which can quickly support any nuances, any changes with regard to the implementation of the platform. I spoke earlier as well about our change management framework for user adoption. And it focuses on how we can align digiGov to the agency, looking at a shared vision and values, teamwork, also looking at how we align digiGov to the employees that are there, looking at the employee experience, the usability, retraining, reschooling, retooling, and the consumerization, ensuring that persons really understand what the process that they're involved in and how they can ensure that the consumer is satisfied with the service and the process, and also ensuring that our IT requirements are aligned to the requirements of the digiGov platform. And again, that also speaks to security as well. And looking at the organizational change, because once we recognize, once we have implemented this new digital process, that process is going directly against the culture and the structure. And so we had to make sure that the organizational culture, had to be amended, massaged, and also to ensure that we utilize the current structure to support the platform. And we felt it was necessary for our governance approach to ensure that there is incentive and recognition of those persons who really, step up to the plate and provide that level of support for the digitization process. And we think it's important, again, to help with that whole idea of driving organizational change. And at the highest level, we know, it starts from there must be that level of support from the top. But however, we recognize that, from the grassroots level, there must be acceptance. And so we felt that incentive and recognition was important for persons to really get on board with the process. So digiGov growth and sustainability. Where are we with that? And what do we see, and how do we see digiGov growth, and how will we sustain that process? So the concept of value-added services is very important, and that speaks directly to private sector participation and private sector support. So all of the terminologies that I've used earlier, data-only ones, cybersecurity, equity of access, specialization, mobile app development, software, all of that we see as the ability of the private sector to connect into digiGov, right? And there are some key areas that we have already spoken about, and we see, and we're going to be using other digital transformation initiative and activities to support that change and that drive for the value-added services. And one of those projects would be the Caribbean Digital Transformation Project, which has components to support exactly what we're doing there. And I'll just speak to those components in a little bit. Again, job creation, cybersecurity is absolutely important. I think we spoke about that earlier, but I heard there was someone who mentioned cybersecurity. And I'm sure we will get some questions on the cybersecurity aspect of the platform as well. Value-added services continued. Again, as I spoke about the private sector, looking at mentorship and internship programs. The government as a service provider. We spoke about service bureau agents earlier. So it's not that only about somebody going online, but if you choose to walk into the government office to apply for a service, we have employed service bureau agents who would then be able to guide you through the process using the platform. Because again, we have some explainer videos that are online that persons can choose to access to understand how to apply for the service. However, considering that we know that culture of walk-in is still very prevalent in our society, those service bureau agents internally at the ministries or agencies are very, very important to get in and improving on that value, improving on that service, that user experience for our constituents. digiGov will also be providing identity as a service. Essentially, once our identity management platform is matured, we could provide that support to the private sector. Where, I'm sure all of us have had the experience of going to the bank and having to provide 2 or 3 pieces of ID for us to either create an account or cash a check. Once we go through the identity management services that digiGov will provide, we can then provide that service to the private sector, where it more or less captures that data only once concept for our citizens. Online payment portal that exists as we speak, so all of our payments, all of our services can be paid online. And we see, again, once we have those service bureaus concept set up, training and capacity building can then be handed over to the private sector once they become partners with the government in moving that digital transformation agenda, with digiGov as the catalyst. And again, we can allow the private sector to build applications to plug into the system for data mining, for statistical analysis, again, which would then be instructive for our policy and decision making. Some other pain points and challenges. I decided to break up the pain points and challenges into 3 main areas: governance, technology, and operational, and some places where there is convergence. And I'm sure that's not an exhaustive list, but I would just want to highlight 1 or 2 in each of the areas. So for example, the legislative environment is so important for us to support our digital transformation agenda, because you do not want to be moving away from a manual process, set up an electronic process, which is not in keeping with the regulations and the law of the land. So that was important, and we had to, and our legal assessment really identified a lot of those inconsistencies which will, which are currently being addressed. Technological or high cost of ICT upgrades. For now, I can tell you that the digiGov system is being hosted on Amazon Web Services. And as part of our Caribbean Digital Transformation Project with the World Bank, we've included the establishment of a mobile data center. And with this data center, we will be migrating, at least for now, the user acceptance environment, our training environment, onto our local loop. And then subsequent to that, we will see how best we can implement a hybrid, high user availability connection back to Amazon to ensure that there is high availability of the platform. But for now, we saw it was easier and at least as well for us to move quickly to get the platform launched, to implement the system using Amazon Web Services. And also in the operational areas, we noticed a lot of redundancy of operations and manuals, as well as the elephant in the room, which was COVID-19, which really slowed down a lot of the activities in trying to do a lot of the assessments that was needed for us to get the other services that are on the schedule implemented. Because a major component of this would be the business process reengineering, which must be done at the start and also during the process to make sure that we could confirm the user requirements and ensure that any tweaks or any adjustments that need to be made can be made before we go fully digital. And obviously, as I said, there are some areas of convergence like human resource capacity. I think we're all suffering from the lack of sufficient human resource capacity, both in government and as a society in the area of digital transformation. Software development is a major one. Cybersecurity is also a major one as well. And through the World Bank project that I spoke of, we're hoping to improve on our cyber. In fact, not improve, we're going to be developing a strategy and also implementing a CERT as well as a network operations center, which would provide us with additional cybersecurity tools to protect our data assets. Some of the lessons critical to success, again, it would speak to a lot of what we've done. It's just how you do it, when you do it, and to make sure you're very consistent. I think that change management, for example, is a very, very detailed exercise that you must, you have to be in it for the long haul. I think that the implementation of the technology was the easy part, and we are constantly training our users. So we have persons trained currently in customer service, ethics, quality assurance, emotional intelligence. And that was important for us, considering that now not now, I should say, we now have persons who would be sharing a lot of data electronically. And so, the whole idea of ethics came into play, that you don't share persons' personal data, ensuring that, now that you're doing something online, you improve on your quality assurance and your customer service. And not just that whole idea of emotional intelligence, where you could be empathetic and really understand the user issues and be able to address them in a very humane manner. And again, that's why, because sometimes we recognize that technology can be a very distant, create distance, and so we felt that it was necessary for persons to really continue to have that empathy and emotional intelligence in dealing with users, especially when persons come in. When you have an irate user, you want to make sure that somebody was disciplined. One of the other areas I can speak of is the idea of incremental change. So the incremental change that we speak about is not necessarily doing it slowly, but what you focus on in that change process. So, for example, we focus on the transport as our proof of concept for our identity management system for the platform, but we still allowed persons to register so that they could get access to the services, right? And we felt that it was necessary to do so as well, just so that persons could get that understanding and appreciate that mindset that it is important to be able to, and you can trust government, right? So that's that incremental part of it. You can trust government with your data. And so registering on the platform is one step, applying for the service is one step, paying online using your credit card, debit card is one step. And so that incrementally allowed for persons to really gravitate and understand the process and trust government with their information. And align, measure and adjust is important with, just considering the amount of monitor and evaluation that we have to do. And one of the major things that we're looking at now is that whole idea of benefits management. And we waited to have a reasonable size of transactions on the platform, especially for the driver's license related services, because we want to focus on benefits management, because we now need to see, okay, it used to cost the government X amount to produce a driver's license. How much does it cost now? Considering that you've made a substantial investment in technology, because we have to pay for hosting, we have to pay for the management, the 24-hour monitoring of the platform. So we need to now do that benefits management to show where the cost savings are, where the operational efficiencies are coming in to further justify more expenditure going forward. So moving forward, what do we plan to do? So there are some of the upcoming services. I spoke of earlier of our identity management system, which we call NAF, the National Authentication Framework. The Registry of Companies, we have totally redone the company registry system. And again, that's it with plans to further integrate our business registry with the IBC. Hopefully, once we get a policy direction on that process would start if the government so desires to go in that direction. We have some more transport-related services. Initially, we focus on license services again with the larger view of looking at our identity management. And now we're focusing on more vehicle-related services, registration of a vehicle, change of ownership, and these types of heavily utilized services at the department. And also the Civil Status Registry, where we're now going to allow for marriage certificate application, life certificates, as well as registration. The first two that we have online right now is birth and death certificates. And so the registration will more or less allow us to go full circle. One thing that I didn't mention in my presentation is that we also have a sister project that is being implemented and managed by our division as well at the Civil Status Registry. And that is part as well of this whole concept of identity management. We wanted to make sure that we could identify users based on the current information data sets that exist. For example, first name, last name, NIC number, date of birth. But we also wanted to tie that back to the Civil Status Registry data as well. So that approach is allowing us to really, at this point in time, consolidate all of that information. I mentioned the Caribbean Digital Transformation Project earlier. And these are more or less the three major components of the project. Some of us here, our countries are part of that project, Grenada, St. Vincent. And these are the major headings there: digital and human environment, which focuses on cybersecurity, data protection. So the funding that we have under this project would allow us to develop our cybersecurity strategy, develop our CERT, and actually the CERT roadmap, and to create the CERT as well. Our digital government infrastructure and platforms. With part of your reading, I'm sure you would have come across the three main databases of government, which would be your people's database, your civil status registry, and all of those identity management systems that are in silos right now, like NIC, drivers, electoral. You also have your business registry, which is called ROSIP at this point in time. But as I said, we're taking over that entire system under digiGov. And thirdly, it is your land registry, which is not part of digiGov at all. However, we're going to be implementing our land registry under this project. So at some point in the future, we will go full circle where somebody can be identified on digiGov, whether it's how much land they own, what taxes they pay, their vehicle, etc. So it's going to come full circle with somebody being able to apply or process any application, and the government would know, and be aware of all of the civil type of data that is necessary to help them process that or apply for that service. And a major component, which is our digital skills and technology, will allow us to continue to evaluate what are the requirements of our business sector, what digital skills are necessary for us to really move the digital transformation needle further. There's also a concept of co-working spaces that we ensured would be in the project. And the concept behind the co-working spaces, again, is to ensure that those young people who come out of the training that we do are ready to go into the work environment. And so our office will be facilitating co-working spaces so the concept is train, identify the high performers, put them in teams, and put them together so that they can solve a problem, whether it's for government or to create new value that can connect again back into the digiGov platform, or something that can just be utilized by any private sector interest. So we think that this conceptually would allow us to go full circle between creating the enabling environment, further improvement to the infrastructure, and also ensuring that we have the right skills and technology in use in Saint Lucia. So going full circle, I think this is my last slide. I just want to say that, Saint Lucia's digital strategy is focusing on creating equity and opportunity and value. I aligned some of this to the policy agenda of the government, focusing on youth empowerment. Again, going back to those digital skills that we spoke about, job placement, which is more or less our co-working spaces. And we're also working with some of our friendly governments to really tie in and connect all of these things as well. So we'll also be setting up some incubator centers across the island, again, trying to tap into that potential that we have lost through CXC or persons leaving school early. We want to be able to tap and access those potentials out there. Equity and opportunity, again, it speaks to inclusiveness, ensuring that there is enough connectivity there, meaningful connectivity, so that persons can connect back into government and be able to participate in the digital economy. I spoke about private sector innovation earlier, and it's key that we focus on adopting cutting-edge technologies. We spoke of Internet of Things, blockchain, etc. We want to be able to at least make those next moves towards that level of private sector innovation on the island. As well, again, as we said, of identity management, because you really cannot have digital transformation if you cannot identify users, identify your people that connect into the system. So again, as I said, we want to create equity, opportunity, and value for everybody in Saint Lucia. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Marlon. Marlon, we have had a feast, and we are now just going to invite questions, comments. You can use a chat. All right, so the first question in the chat here from Sean, and he's asking, how simple or user-friendly is the interface that you're using to access this, use so that people can access the services, especially for the less tech-savvy citizens?
Yes, we try to make the platform as very user-friendly as possible. However, we have we also utilize our social media platforms. And we took a lot of feedback very early on in the process. So once we launched the platform in June of 2020, the first 3 to 6 months was really absorbing all of that feedback on the usability of the platform to make it as user-friendly as possible. And so those processes that we have right now on the platform is very, very user-friendly. And it was due to a lot of the feedback that we got from our initial set of users. In fact, up to last night, a colleague of mine messaged me and said he's applying for his vaccine certificate for his mother, but he had to click on back. And I would imagine he's around my age. And so if his mother is in her 70s, he would be clicking back nonstop to get to her birth date 70 years ago. And I told him he needs to click on the year field for him to get a sub-menu of the years. But again, it goes back to usability and being able to utilize the GUI in different ways. And so we've gotten that feedback several times. We've made changes to the platform. But it's just how some of the nuances is just about how people prefer to use the system. And so sometimes we have to make a judgment call. But for the most part, we've been able to incorporate a lot of the feedback that we've received through social media.
All right, thanks. Now, there are lots of compliments in the chat as well about the presentation. And some other questions. Alison Gittins, I believe is from Barbados. She's asking, what's the size of your team? That's an interesting one because it seems like you've done a lot of work. So what's the size of your team? How much of the work did you guys do in-house? How much was outsourced? And your greatest challenges?
Yes, that's a very good question. We get that question every time we present. So a lot of the technical work, in fact, I should start this way. We have 3 persons, including myself, who are core to the digiGov implementation. So I'm more or less the project manager for the project. There is Denise Joseph, she's also on the call, and Mr. John F. Kodra. Denise is the change management specialist, our lead on change management for user adoption. And Mr. Kodra is our technical lead. However, in one of my slides, I spoke to applied research and development and private sector know-how. And what we did was hire the best in Crimson Logic out of Singapore to assist us with the technical implementation of the project. So all of the change management is we doing all of that. How the business process re-engineering, it was a 50-50 process between us and them. And I would admit that it was a lot of long, very long hours at the office, meeting with the stakeholders, digesting the information, and then obviously regurgitating it and putting it in both a user-friendly manner so that we can get further feedback, but also then developing those technical requirements, the SOPs, and the requirements definition documents for the actual development work. So all of the development work is being done by our consultant, who's Crimson Logic out of Singapore.
All right, thanks. And there's a lovely commentary in the chat. In order to provide quality, effective, and efficient services, all the stakeholders need to come on board. Public education is important. Systems also have to be put in place for those who are unable to utilize this service, such as the elderly. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit about, not just the elderly, but perhaps the differently abled amongst your stakeholders, and how are they accommodated?
Yes, so this is incremental for us. So the first phase of this is our service bureau agents. So it focuses on anyone who's not able to access the system for themselves. They can do so through a service bureau agent who would apply for the service on their behalf. All of the personal information that has to be shared, for example, an email address can be shared with the service bureau agent. That information is then inputted in the application. But the service bureau agent has a special role on the platform to assist anyone who cannot apply for the service themselves. At this point in time, we have 5 remote sites, and we just completed the establishment of a site in Castries where the public can go there to apply for the services. Speaking specifically to the differently abled, this is a value added that we see as part of the project. So this would be something that would be done through private sector interests. And once we get to component 3, once we have funding under the Caribbean Digital Transformation Project under component 3, we would then be putting out requests for quotations for persons to build those differently able types of functionality onto the platform. So it was we had a finite requirement for Crimson Logic, but then again, as we said, we saw digiGov as the catalyst to allow for us to get our private sector directly involved in the project. Because initially, persons were saying, but we can do that. What's so difficult in developing a system like digiGov? And part of my pushback was there are a guy who builds a house, a 3-bedroom house, he calls himself a contractor. The same person who built the Burj Dubai in Dubai is also a contractor, but there's a difference in complexity in those two projects. And so we felt the need to get the best to give us that foundation, but then create value opportunities by just doing the bare minimum to get the system up and running. And this is what we've done. And so again, it comes down also to funding. And this is where the Caribbean Digital Transformation Project comes in. Unfortunately for me in Saint Lucia, I was the one involved in the negotiation for CARICAD. I was the one involved in the negotiation for IGRIP. I was the one who negotiated for the Caribbean Digital Transformation Project. So I'm fully aware with all institutional knowledge of all of the gaps from each of these projects and what was the long-term strategic goal and value that we want. And so it was easy for us in the negotiations to really include these specific activities in the project. And so at the high level, the 4 countries have the same components. However, some of the activities are very different. For Saint Lucia, we're focusing heavily on skill development and also enabling the private sector to come in and plug into the digiGov platform.
All righty, thanks. Mark, you sort of touched on it in your response just now, but Grantley is asking, since he observed the associated with innovation and the private sector, and is it that we're not expecting the public service itself to be the source of innovation in terms of digital technology? Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, did you hear the question?
Can you repeat that, please? No.
Yes, Grantley is saying in the chat, he observed that there's association in your presentation between innovation and the private sector. In other words, the future innovations are expected to be generated from the private sector. That is what he is assuming from your presentation. And so he's asking, is there no expectation that some of that innovation will be generated from the public service itself as it relates to digital technology?
Yes, it's a two-pronged approach, right? And so there is another component within our division, and that is being managed by the Chief ICT Officer. And we focus again on some of the other activities or processes within government. And for us to be able to improve on those internal efficiencies of the agency. So our office, for example, we've developed a performance management system, an electronic performance management system for government. And we've had several other agencies who have contacted us to help them streamline their own internal ICT operations. So digiGov is just that catalyst focusing more towards the driving that digital economy. But the other component of our office also does provide support for digital transformation, but looking at more specific to some of the internal operations that are not directly impacted, that does not directly impact the public and providing public service.
Okay, thanks so much for that, Marlon, for that clarification. Franzi is asking about, I guess they're trying to find out to what extent is the structure of the Government of Saint Lucia centralized? And the extent of centralization did it make this process of implementing digiGov easier?
I would say that in one of the slides earlier, I spoke to let me just try to get to that slide. One of the slides earlier, I spoke of streamlining our ICT resources, skilled personnel, the reassignment of ICT personnel. This is actually a long-standing matter for us. But as part of the Digital Saint Lucia strategy, we're also making recommendations for a new structure for the rationalization of ICT human resource capacity in government. So it will speak to a shared services office that would focus on looking at those internal efficiencies, as I spoke about earlier, that do not directly speak to public services, and also different components such as security, maintenance. It's a very big structure, and this is this is one of the challenges that you find in government also, right? Rationalizing the budget and the priority areas. And every year, I think we have a frustration that we do not receive the kind of budget support that we requested. And so at this point in time, that skilled personnel component as one of our objectives has not been realized, in the sense that because of, again, the silos. So every PS is responsible for their staff. And essentially this recommendation, and that came down from cabinet, by the way. There's a cabinet conclusion which supports us to move in that direction. And I would say, to his credit, the former prime minister was really aggressively trying to get that done, because he saw the merit in really rationalizing and centralizing the structure. And so we're going to be making incremental changes, incrementally trying to do that. And the way we decided to undertake that process is to be the ones to approve structures within the government. Because for us to do it in one go, it would look like such a monumental task, as well as the budgetary implications for that. So, and I have had some discussions with on that internally in the office. So what we decided was, for example, we worked with the Civil Status Registry to build their civil registry modernization project. All of the recommendations for structure comes from us. So within their own ministry, their structure was approved. However, the intention is, once we get the approval, to then move those positions to our office. And then we will provide they will only have a small skeleton staff to provide the daily technical support, but all of the highly skilled staff, like the software developers, the systems analysts, this person will reside in the DPSM. So we've made that recommendation for Civil Status Registry, and we're now doing that for the Statistics Department. And there are one or two other agencies that have already created those structures, which we will then be absorbing incrementally to form that cadre of professions that we speak about. So we did not, the approach of doing it one bang, we moved away from that. We're looking at that incremental change that I spoke about earlier. And we feel that that essentially allows for us to get more support and buy-in in the process. And another thing that we recognize as well, through digiGov and even those internal efficiencies that we're doing, we recognize that there is more, there's more recognition of the department and more support for what we do by those persons, those PSs, etc. But again, for these things to happen and these things to work properly, all of the tentacles of government must function. Things like the Committee of PSs, I'm sure all of us are familiar with that. These types of institutions must function so that we can have a consolidated strategic view of what the requirements are for the ministry and the departments. But specific to digital transformation, it's such a nice buzzword that everybody feels, hey, I must have my own IT officer, I must have my own technicians. But really and truly, for us to rationalize government even further, we need to be able to consolidate those skill sets and those processes.
So indeed. We are winding down close to the end of this webinar. And so a couple of questions remain. So there is a question by Vishnu, which really relates to the issue of data security and trust. And so how are you dealing with the levels of distrust that at least we know some citizens have when they hear things like data one system and your data is going to be accessible across ministries? And what is being put in place to prevent the unsavory usage and abuse of this data?
Yes, so we have a three-pronged approach here. One is that we're making sure that the legislation is in place to provide us with recourse and protection. So actually, the commencement order for our Data Protection Act is with the Minister for signature at this very moment. Secondly, I spoke about training earlier for the users who now have access to that personal data, ethics, etc. Customer service, quality assurance is so important. Even if the implementation of our vaccine certificate, we highlighted the need for quality assurance so much, because you don't want your citizen to leave the country, travel overseas, present a certificate with a wrong date of birth on there. So, quality, these things are very, very vital. And thirdly, what would be the protections or the cybersecurity apparatus for the platform? And this is one of the reasons why we selected Amazon Web Services as our provider for us to be online 24/7. There's 24/7 monitoring of the platform. And as part of that ICT security apparatus, for example, digiGov, the administrative side of digiGov can only be accessed through the government system. So even though digiGov is out in the cloud on Amazon, you cannot access the administrative portal if you're not within the government network. And also, we have a lot of credentials for those persons who, and I shouldn't say persons, for those roles on the platform. So there are service bureau agent roles, there are clerk roles, and there are supervisor roles as well. And so within the process of approving a application, we have removed any opportunity for collusion because of how those applications are accepted by the user or the clerk before it is approved by the supervisor. So as far as data protection goes, we have left no stone unturned, and we continue to look for ways in which to improve. And this is the other reason why we've also looked at that data sharing bill, which again provides further protection for persons who choose to share their information in government. And the funny thing about it, when we started that process, we said, but government has had a system for driver's license for many, many years without the proper legislation in place, but because now you have to do it online, it became a bigger issue. And so we had to address that before we launch a project.
And there are a couple more questions. So one question is, was the digital platform was it able to really integrate into already existing systems? So that's one question. Mm-hmm. And the other question is about what strategies are you putting in place to increase the usage of the platform? Because we recognize from some of the statistics that the uptake of people accessing through the platform was relatively low, and this was new. But what's the strategy to build up usage so that will become more the go-to way of accessing those services? And was the system designed to be to interface with already existing systems?
Yes, so we've integrated with all of the systems so far. So for example, as I indicated earlier, the Department of Transport had an existing system. And so the first thing we did was take a data dump so that we could analyze the data. And we recognized there were several inconsistencies. So I could just give you a quick idea of the process. At Transport, we had about 50,000 drivers. Out of the 50,000, there were about 3,000 duplicate users. Well, I should say NIC numbers, national insurance numbers. There were 3,000 duplicate numbers. And we were able to, with a matter of high certainty, approve about 70% of those registered users, so that all of the information was consistent. We did that through an analysis of the core NIC data from the NIC information that we had at the NIC office. And so we needed to integrate with the transport department for us to have business continuity, because we only focus on on the driver's license at the time, and then we still had persons coming to apply for the what they call it again, the learner's permits, and so we needed to integrate. So we integrated there. For the registry of companies, not registry of companies, for the civil status registry, we're also integrating with them as well, so that, because digiGov is only the front end for civil status, we decided not to do a complete end-to-end solution through digiGov for the civil status registry because of the specialized system that you need there. So we actually procured a system from a company out of Canada, and their system is what is being implemented at the registry. However, there was a lot of customization that had to be done to really assure us the type of service that we needed, and to ensure that we were able to get the process that the registrar has approved in an electronic format. So we're integrating directly with that system as well. However, for some of the stakeholders, like our registry of companies, digiGov will be taking over the entire registry system, as well as our electoral department. The full system would be on digiGov as well. And some of the other agencies that are part of the process, our passport office just is in the process now of upgrading their passport system. Again, that's a specialized system, so digiGov will be the front end for that system as well. There are some of the smaller units, like our Citizenship unit. We're going to be doing a complete end-to-end solution for them. For our work permits, we'll be doing full end-to-end. And we're actually in the process now as well of revising some of the services, because Ministry of Health had about 40 services on the project. However, with the new government, they've given us the approval to renegotiate those services and reprioritize the services. So we're actually in the process of doing that now, meeting with those new stakeholders, such as our social transformation department, to see what type of services that they would want to allow the public to access. Our agricultural department is another area as well. So once we do that analysis, we will see whether there is a need to integrate if there's an existing system, or whether we do a full end-to-end for that. For our land registry, for sure, it will be another process where we'll be integrating based on what component of the project that we undertake right now. Whether we look at just, for example, identity. So how much land does Marlon own? What land does Marlon own? If we just take it from that perspective, we will probably do end-to-end. If we're going into the cadastre and looking at the different land usage, etc., we will have to integrate it with whatever system that they have there currently. So we can do both, and we've been implementing it on a needs basis. And again, that is being done through separate contracts with private sector or private individuals who we know that are good in software development, whether it's Java or any of the Microsoft tools that they utilize to allow for that integration.
All right, Marlon.
The second part of it, I think, was
sorry.
It was about integration and the usage, the utility. Right. So I'm happy to answer that question. We have our social media, we've chosen to put a lot of our resources for now in our social media platforms. So we have a YouTube channel, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. And the reason for that is that we again, looking at that whole idea of e-participation and connecting with that culture of, online access. We have been in a lot of social media engagement. As I indicated, from the start of the project, we've been bordering between 35 and 42% online payments. So let me just clarify. So we have every transaction on digiGov is online. Every transaction is online. However, we've allowed for two processes. One is an end-to-end process to apply and pay online. And then there's a second process, because we recognize that so many people are unbanked, is to apply and pay over the counter. So I could apply for my driver's license, put all my information, and when I reach to pay, I can say either I pay through a debit or credit card, or I pay over the counter. The platform will issue me with a bill ID. I will then take, oh yes, we also integrated with the Treasury. That I could have forgotten that one. So that bill ID is then taken to a Treasury counter. So when the person goes to Treasury, they give the Treasury officer the bill ID. The Treasury officer then goes into the Treasury system, puts in that information. The Treasury system then tells digiGov, I received payment for this application, you could go ahead and process it. So that's one of the major areas that we integrated with as well. So by doing that, we've now allowed for both persons who have trust and who are familiar with technology, who want to do everything online, they could apply and pay. And also we're still ensuring that there's inclusiveness, and we're still getting those persons who are not too sure, but they don't really say, okay, I can go in and walk in. And even though you walk into any office with digiGov, it will still be an online application, right? So that is a way of trying to just inculcate this whole idea of digital transformation and persons seeing the need for them to come on board with technology. And it has been working well. So, and again, that's why I said earlier, I didn't want you to be misled by the pie chart or the information, but I felt it was necessary to share it as well, so that persons don't figure, hey, once you go online, it has to be 99% or 20%. In some jurisdictions, for example, when I understood the Singapore experience way back in when, I could remember the government is making those very strong policy positions, taking those strong policy positions. As of X date, it's no longer a walk-in process. And, that's just what people have to deal with. But in our side of the world, I guess there is this caution that the politicians have to take, even in these types of addressing these types of issues. And so we felt the need to, it had to more or less, it more or less give the policymakers a good way to say, okay, we're doing that. And at the same time, it's giving us an opportunity to get people on the digital transformation train. So it works well. But again, even looking at demographics for civil status registry, for example, we know it will take a longer time for the people who normally apply for digital certificate, birth certificate or death certificate, to really complete that entire transaction online, because there's just a strong culture of a walk-in to get that civil data, that civil document.
Yeah. Marlon, I want to thank you so very much. You see the questions, engagement, we're actually over time. And so we're just going to wrap up. Marlon, thanks a million. And so for persons who have been asking, so we have been streaming live via our YouTube channel. So the link to that, to see the recording afterwards, you can simply go to our YouTube channel, Caribbean Center for Development Administration. And for all our registrants, you will also be emailed a copy of the slides as well. Marlon, I invite you just to stop sharing, so I could just share a couple of announcements. And so if you want to get any assistance from CARICAD with your transformation process, please do just reach out to us at info@caricad.net. And remember now, there are 2 more our webinars in our webinar series. So next week, same time, we were looking at digitization in education, lessons from our member state, Guyana. And on May 25, we'll be talking about implementing a user-centered approach to the digitization of public services. And we'll have the presentation from Dr. Germaine Joel Jean-Pierre from Dominica there, and from the Caribbean Digital Transformation Project that Marlon referenced earlier. We have issued our call for our mid-level leadership development program. And indeed, this is a program that prepares mid-level leaders, not just to lead their team, but also to lead innovation and transformation as well. That's a critical component of that leadership program. And so you can go to our website to get application details, and you can email us as well. You see our email address there for more details. So we invite you now. We will now put up the poll. We just want to hear your feedback on the webinar. There it is. And so invite you just to complete the very short poll for us, just 9 questions. And then after